Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After running through the news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer Dolphins fans' questions. This was an exhausting one, ladies and gentlemen. We'll break down the game after we run you through the news you need to know about. Very, very tough day for Dolphins fans, and it is what it is, but let's get into the news you need to know about. This first news story comes from Fox Sports, where Jay Glazer, in the pregame show, said that the Houston Texans have, quote, softened up on trading for Deshaun Watson. And he also said, quote, the Dolphins are the obvious trade partner. So I wanted to throw this in there because it's, it made circulation before the game. I do want to put my 2 cents in on this. I think people just need to drop it at this point, and I think Dolphins fans just need to let this go. It's not happening. Despite what Mike Florio says constantly on NBC Sports, talking about how Stephen Ross is like pounding the table for this, which we still don't really know where he's getting this information, because we've seen, not seen, but we've heard people, even beat writers, say that's not true. So I don't know what to believe anymore. All I do know is that that's not going to happen, and people just gotta, at some point, just let it go. It definitely won't happen this year. If it does, then I guess the Stephen Ross rumors are true, because I definitely don't see this front office, and definitely not Brian Flores, even thinking about that right now. That's for sure. Maybe Chris Greer is thinking about it, but definitely not Brian Flores. And I think out of anybody in the organization that would be putting the most thought into it, it would definitely be Stephen Ross. So if it did happen, then I guess Mike Florio and all those people was right. But I think as Dolphins fans, I would just ignore it, because I just don't think there's any way that'll happen. So moving on from the whole Deshaun Watson fiasco, let's get into the next news story. Obviously, you guys know about this, but Tua obviously was placed on IR. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. He will miss 3 weeks. He's expected to return in Week 6 versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. I wanted to talk about this topic, not because of Tua, but because of Jacoby. And, I said some things about Jacoby that were harsh last week. Especially since I knew he was going to play, and he's going to play the next 2 games. I did a deep dive on Jacoby. I watched a lot of his games. And I definitely came out way more positive than negative, that's for sure. One of the things that I really like, and I want to keep this maybe as short, and definitely don't want to ramble on as much as possible, but one of the things that I definitely wanted to note and wrote down when I was watching him play is, for someone who definitely is not a check down Charlie, who likes to push the ball down the field, who definitely uses his size to his advantage and hold on to the ball. He's not easily sacked with arm sacks, and he's not pushed around the pocket. He's got good pocket presence, and that's something I said last week. Is he doesn't move. He didn't really move around the pocket against the Bills all that well. Going back and watching a lot of his old games, I'm completely wrong about that. He does have good pocket presence. Like I said, I think he's got a great feel for the game in the pocket. He uses his size to his advantage, as we saw in this Raiders game. So I think his pocket is just fine, and I think it will fit this offensive line. But one of the more impressive things, and especially if you look at his career stats, his best year in Indy, he threw 18 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. And what I think is impressive about that is the fact that he does look down the field and he does hold on the ball that long, that he doesn't throw interceptions. He does take care of the ball, which fits this team's identity of a kind of a defensive, more of a defensive identity. That's, obviously where we're best at. So he does fit the team in that way. I do think he fits behind this offensive line better than I said last week. I think he fits perfect. In some ways better than Tua, because he is so big and he does move in the pocket and he does use his size. I mean, there was plenty of times in that game against this game against the Raiders where he could have easily been sacked, but he was just so strong that he was able to get out of some of those hairy situations. So his pocket and him, as far as him playing behind this offensive line, he definitely was squeezed every bit of juice out of the orange that he could, especially in this game, which I take my hat off to him. That was one of the better performances I've seen by a quarterback in a long time wearing a Dolphins uniform. And, he's the only reason we even were in that game. I don't think, and I'm being honest with you guys, I don't think Tua keeps that game as close as it was. And I know some people might not want to hear that, but some of the plays that Jacoby made, I mean, the 4th and 20, that was a rope. He made a lot of tight window throws in this game, which surprised me. And that's another thing, going back and watching some of his older games, is when it's there and he sees it, I mean, he throws a beautiful ball. From his release, it's a perfect spiral. He's got so much arm strength. He throws a beautiful deep ball. There's a lot of things I like about Jacoby's game, which is interesting because he did play so well against the Raiders. And I do think, like I said, he squeezed as much as he could out of that orange. I think he left some on the bone, and we're going to get into some of the negatives here in a second with him. But why this relates to the Tua story is, it's going to be interesting to see if he can continue at that level, and they implement some of the fourth quarter stuff that we did into other games where we're a little bit more aggressive, not a little bit more, but a lot more aggressive, and we just let Jacoby kind of play 7-on-7 football back there, like we kind of did in the end of the game. A lot more, more pace, more of a 2-minute drill type of a style, and he can continue that pace because he was underdressed the entire game. The Raiders play cover 3. They play a lot of cover 3. They play a lot of zone defense. And they're rarely out of their spots. There's rarely a busted coverage. And he didn't turn the ball over, and he passed it 49 times. If he can continue that kind of play, it would be hard to bench him. And it's going to be interesting to see if he can keep it up. I mean, if you look at his next 2 opponents, the next game, obviously, he gets Indianapolis at home. And then the game after that, he gets Atlanta. And then the reins go back to Tua. Excuse me, not Atlanta, Tampa Bay. So he gets Indianapolis, and then he gets Tampa Bay. And then we'll see if Tua gets the reins back or not. But if he can continue that type of play, it's going to be interesting to see what Brian's decision will be. Because I think he played well. And I liked what I saw going back and, kind of doing a deep dive on him. And like I said, he doesn't turn the ball over. He does throw with a lot of more accuracy than I think a lot of people give him credit for. I mean, some of those tight throws, some of those plays he made, it was very Steve McNair-esque. Some of the stuff he was doing out there reminded me a lot of him, how big and strong Steve was and how he kind of extended plays. Jacoby's obviously not the athlete that Steve was. But like I said, Jacoby also does throw from the pocket pretty well as well. In terms of some of the negatives that I saw in this game that Jacoby has to clean up if he wants to keep this job is consistency. There was a few throws that I don't understand. Like the one to Myles Gaskin is a perfect example of that. I just don't understand. There's always a throw in every Jacoby Brissett game that you're like, why? Like, he throws so well, and then he does that, and it's like, what is going on? It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. That play obviously is more of like a pick, like a rub route play. Gaskin was free down the sideline. If he just either puts it on him or even leads him a little bit, that's a big gain. Obviously, the play didn't affect the game all that much because we ended up scoring on that drive anyway, so it ended up working out. And then obviously Jacoby made a lot of crazy, crazy special plays to even get that game into overtime. So, and even in overtime to keep the game alive, that was a very, very special play. So I think some of the negatives of Jacoby is, he does, for some odd reason, he has a couple of those throws a game where you're kind of like, what? And even going back and watching some of the older games, it's like he's improved so much with his accuracy, it's unbelievable. And I think he's peaked that, and he's learned from a lot of great coaches, from Josh McDaniels to Frank Reich, Bill Parcells. He grew up around him, so he's learned from the best, and that really does show in the way he plays the game and his mechanics and stuff of that nature. But if he can just clean that up a little bit, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. Every quarterback has throws like that, but those are gimme throws. Like, he needs to make those. And then the other thing is like, you would like him to make, he apparently missed a read down the middle of the field to Mike Gesicki. Again, these are more of, especially now that I'm talking about him, more nitpicky than anything. he can't miss that read. I can't wait to go back and watch the all 22 to see exactly what happened on that play, why he didn't go to it. But that was a big play. That was a big drive of the game. If he did have Mike Gesicki down the seam, that would have put us in scoring range. And obviously he missed the read. So obviously not a perfect day for Jacoby Brissett, and definitely not a perfect day for the offensive side of the ball. But there was a lot of things to like. Like I said, I think he throws the deep ball really well. He's really good at those 15 to 20 yard in cuts, out cuts, all of that kind of stuff. He really does a good job behind this offensive line. That's a little bit more stable. I like some of the stuff that we did in this, especially. And one of the things that Jacoby was able to do, which I haven't seen a Dolphins quarterback do in a very long time, was wear down the pass rush. And he did that. Him running around all the dang time. There was one play where it seemed like he covered 50 yards. It ended up being an incomplete pass, but it tires their front seven, and it makes their offensive line's job even easier. So he did do that, which I haven't seen a Dolphins quarterback do that in a very long time. And not since probably 2 against the Cardinals, where I'm like, if it wasn't for the quarterback, we wouldn't have been in this game. And I really do believe you can say that for Jacoby. So it's interesting. I'm interested to see what Jacoby does. He showed a lot of promise in the past, and I'm interested to see what he can do and take advantage of in these next 2 games. Maybe we see a little bit of a spark, especially after kind of getting things going in that fourth quarter. So I know it's a negative day. If there's one positive thing to look for, it is, hey, maybe Jacoby has finally hit his stride. We've seen quarterbacks throughout NFL history hit it, bloom a little bit later than others. Maybe this is him, because he has all the talent to be a franchise guy, and he's shown flashes of it. I mean, his run in Indianapolis, even people like Chris Sims ranked him in their top 10 in the NFL when he had that stretch in Indianapolis. He obviously got injured, and when he came back the same year, things were never the same. But I think he definitely has it in him. We saw in that Raiders game. If there's anything to be positive about, it's about Jacoby, and really I'm interested to see where he brings this in these next 2 games. So that's it for the news, ladies and gentlemen. And like I said, this whole Jacoby thing is definitely going to be interesting, because if he can continue to play like that, I would have a hard time of benching him. And I know I'm interested to see what you guys think about that. So let's move on to the game itself. And I think realistically, when you look at this game, there's a lot of things that factored into us losing this game. But I think the biggest thing, and the thing that I take away from this game that I think bothers me the most, is the play calling, especially throughout the game, really. Not even just in the fourth quarter and in overtime, but really just throughout the game. There was a lot of calls that you kind of scratch your head at and are thinking. And there were some personnel groupings that were really weird. And I want to hit on those examples before we kind of get into some of the other stuff that happened in this game in terms of from a player's perspective. But the most obvious one that we're going to get out of the way right now that just made me want to throw something through the window was the backed up on your own goal line screen pass, I guess, out of an empty formation when he didn't have anybody blocking for him. It was like, you usually don't see a play like that unless you're under center, when the defense thinks run. When the defense is just looking at their quarterback or just the receivers, when they know you're not going to run the ball, it's way easier to kind of key in on things, especially when your adrenaline's going. When a defense or an offense is backed up on their own goal line and you see the empty formation, I don't understand what the thought process. It's not even Jacoby's fault for throwing it. I don't even blame Jacoby. I blame the offensive staff for putting the players in that position. One of the dumbest, and I've seen some stupid stuff as a Dolphins fan. Probably top 3 dumbest things I've ever seen in my life. As a football fan. Okay? That's up there with the Pat McAfee fake against the Patriots. That is one of the dumbest things I have ever seen. I don't know who's responsible for it. I would like them to let themselves be known, because that was really stupid. And you would think, as a Dolphins fan, oh, that's as bad as it'll get this entire game. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you'd be wrong. Because guess what? It gets worse. Somehow, it gets worse. So, let's get to the things that somehow it got worse. And I really, really, really don't understand it. One of the things that really bugged me was the sequence of events that really led up to Jacoby having that crazy touchdown run. The Wildcat stuff, I really didn't understand. I know that it's a numbers game, and in the Wildcat, you should theoretically have the numbers advantage. To me, that's not true. I've never agreed with it. If you have a good offensive line, fine. If you're a physical, one of the more productive offensive lines in the NFL, yeah, I guess you could get away with it. But when you're our offensive line and you're running the Wildcat and you're making it as obvious as day that you're running the ball, I've never been a fan of that. So I guess that's more of a personal preference thing, but I just thought running it 2 times in a row was really stupid. The idea is that you have, it's more of a fair advantage for the offense in the run scheme. Because you should have a good luck. Excuse me. I don't know why I'm stuttering so much. You should have a good luck in the box in the numbers game with the amount of people you have. Blocking them, you should feel comfortable with. But when Jacoby Brissett they're just ignoring him on the sideline. So to me, it just becomes null void. The third thing is, and I don't want to lose my train of thought, the third thing that I really don't understand with the way that we design plays, and it was a perfect contrast to what the Raiders were doing on the other side of the ball, is motion. We don't motion enough in this offense. We're not very creative in the pass game, which really ticks me off. I don't understand what they're doing over there as a coaching staff, but you could see, and a lot of this big plays that we gave up as a Dolphins defense was all off motion. Every time they ran the ball, every time they passed the ball, a lot of it looked the same. And every single time they had someone motioning around. I mean, some of the bigger plays to Henry Ruggs was off motion. Some of the biggest plays of the day, almost every single one of them, was either off of a broken play or motion. And you don't see the Dolphins defense do any of that. Or, excuse me, the Dolphins offense, they don't motion at all. And, you hear people like Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid. Kyle Shanahan said something similar, or someone said about Kyle Shanahan, how when you motion someone, the defense has to adjust like 4 or 5 people. You hear Kansas City and Tony Romo when he's commentating that game is what makes him so hard to defend a lot of the time is they're constantly motioning people, constantly window dressing, constantly give the defense the different looks. And we're really stagnant as an offense. There's very little motion, and that's a problem. And that needs to be corrected, in my opinion. And then, obviously, I think the crown jewel of just terrible coaching of this game, and I'm sure there's more, that I'm forgetting. It's a little bit late. I'm tired. I'm sure that I really need to start taking notes because there's a lot of times in this game where I was livid with some of the play calling. But the crown jewel, and somehow, to me, this is worse than even backed up on your own goal line, lining up an empty and throwing a smoke screen to the right side. I don't know how it could get worse, but it did. 3rd and 3, you're in your opponent's territory. You have the momentum. Their front, hopefully, yeah. Sorry, the mic was freaking out right there for some reason. Anyway, back to my point. And again, I just want to... I know that it sucks that you guys are just going to hear this thing, but I want to reiterate, this is probably the worst... To me, this is the worst play of the game. You're in your opponent's territory. You're driving into overtime. Everybody's tired. Jacoby has exhausted their front. You could tell by the intensity, and, we're pass blocking better. We have them on the ropes. And... First of all, the thing that kills me about this play is they run a little bit of a sweep play to Ahmed. And the thing that really ticks me off, is they seal the edge. So if he just hands it off, and maybe I'm wrong, but at first blush, this is how I remember it. If he just hands it off to Ahmed, it's a first down. And it might be even more, because they did seal the edge, and they had numbers to the edge. Instead, whoever dumb idea this was, They throw a shovel pass to Mike Gesicki. Now, it did work earlier in the game. Earlier in the game, still a bad play call. They should not have put this in the game plan at all. For some reason, it worked. I don't know why the Raiders gave it up, but they did. Why in the world, situations, circumstances, everything, you would run this play makes me want to punch 50,000 walls in this, in my room right now, in the wall. It just blows my mind, the incompetence that goes in to the thought process of calling that play. As a quarterback, there is no way, if I was a quarterback, there is no way I would let that go through. I wouldn't be able to do that to my team in an overtime game, calling something that stupid. It is dumb that they did that. And I don't know if I've even finished the play, but they throw a little bit of a shovel pass to Mike Gesicki underneath in the interior of the offense and defensive line, which blows my mind because Mike Gesicki is not a physical tight end at all. So why you would throw him into that trash, I don't know. The worst play call of the Brian Flores era, and it's not even close. It's not even close. It's not even close. It infuriates me even thinking about it. And I hate to use this term, but it's true. As a fan, it breaks your heart. Like, to get to that moment of the game, to do something that bonehead and just ridiculous is it just doesn't make sense. And it's gonna bother me until next game. I'm gonna be thinking about that play all the time. And just think of the circumstances, especially if you're the Raiders defense. I mean, that's what they want you to do. I mean, Jacoby's been on fire. They just got the wind knocked out of him with that 4th and 20. I mean, the wind out of the building was knocked out with that one. Not only that, but now you're driving, right? It's 3rd and 3. All you have to do is get 3 yards. Jacoby's been running around. Their defense is tired. Their defense is banged up. We've had 50 of these guys on the floor. And you run the dumbest play ever. Just put the ball in Jacoby's hands and let him make a play. That's the only reason we've been in this game. That's the only reason we're at this moment of the game. He's feeling it. Even Brian Flores said after the game, Jacoby really settled in there and started making some big time throws. Why the heck did you guys do that then? It's 3 yards. Spread the ball out. 3 or 4 wide receivers set up the back of the back with Gaskin in the backfield with Mike Gesicki at tight end, with Jacoby and what he's been doing in overtime in the 4th quarter. I like my chances to get those 3 yards. It just blows my mind with some of the decisions in this game. Blows my mind. And you know what blows my mind even more? To look on the other side of the ball when the defense had such a good game plan. And I want to get into that here in a second. But compared to last year, our game plan was way better than last year's game plan. Way better. It reminded me a lot of what Bill Belichick would do. And, some of the stuff wasn't executed well. Derek Carr made a lot of really nice throws. But to contrast how the offenses ran to how the defenses ran and how intricate and how everything is disguised and how creative the defensive side of the ball is, to then look on the offensive side of the ball and it's just a mess. It doesn't make a lot of sense how those two can be so different. I think the positive side of the offensive side of the ball is they did kind of find something with that tempo 2-minute style offense and really let Jacoby kind of just, hey man, go out there, hold the ball, make a play with your legs, stiff arm a guy. Hopefully we give you good protection at times, and you can find someone downfield. But other than that, most of the time, 40-50% of the time, hopefully we can get it down to that, you're going to have to be making a play with your legs. And he showed that he could do it. And it sucks the fact that to me, I think that was the biggest play of the game. 3rd and 3 in your opponent's territory in overtime. Obviously, we ended up kicking a 50-yard field goal, which Jason Sanders barely made. And yeah, that to me, that was the biggest play of the game. And it just was a really bad decision by the coaches. But I think some of the other things that I really noticed in this game is execution-wise. The fast to the line of scrimmage, running that quarterback sneak was really stupid to me. On quarterback sneaks, you kind of want to let everything settle. Jacoby did not do a good job of getting leverage on that play. He went really high, and that's pretty much the only reason we got stopped right there. That was a big play, so that play was just executed very poorly. There was a few offensive plays that were executed great, but that's pretty much it. I think on the offensive side of the ball, especially at the beginning of the game, their pass rush was kind of having their way. We were doing a better job of running the ball. But the way that Gus Bradley runs his defense, he plays a lot of zone, and when your front four can get that much pressure and you don't even have to blitz, and when you play zone coverage, you're not going to get anything down the field. You're just not. Especially if your front four is getting pressure. And a lot of the times he couldn't even dink and dunk. But as the game went on, and he was starting to kind of tire the defense out, we saw some... And I wish we would have seen that earlier in the game with just a little bit more aggressiveness. But, clearly this coaching staff doesn't... this stat says it all. Jalen Waddle had 12 catches. And watching this game, you wouldn't believe I said that this is true. But he had 12 catches in this game for 58 yards. So this coaching staff needs to open it up a little bit. And honestly, I think Jacoby is the best one for the job in terms of just... being able to extend plays. He's a big, strong quarterback. And let's just see what he can do with it. But clearly, this conservative, protecting the offensive line approach isn't working. They need to open it up a little bit and kind of just go for it. So, I think, to be honest with you, a lot of the same issues on offense. I think some of them are getting better. I like this lineup more than previous in terms of the offensive lineman with Eichenberg at tackle and Davis at guard. I liked it a little bit better. I thought they played a little bit better. Eichenberg still has some rookie moments, but you're going to get that from time to time. But for the most part, I definitely thought this was a step in the right direction for the offensive line. Defensively, and I know me saying the step in the right direction, it wasn't pretty, ladies and gentlemen. It wasn't good by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they definitely, especially towards the end of the game, and I think a lot of it had to do with Jacoby running around, and this is why I think he can be a benefit to the team. I think a lot of it had to do with that, but the run game was better. If you look at the stats, Gaskin... he had 13 carries for 65 yards. Malcolm only had 7 carries for 31. He averaged 4 yards a carry, and Gaskin averaged 5 yards a carry. So there is a little bit of an improvement in the run game. They looked a little bit more physical. So there are some good... I think the most positive thing to take away from this game is Jacoby and the offensive line run blocking a little bit better. That's pretty much it. Defensively, I think... a lot of it had to do with fatigue. It sucks in overtime that we couldn't stop them one time. I really expected, especially, how we ended the game to go into overtime with that Brandon Jones sack. I was like, okay, I think we kind of found something. I thought Derek Carr did a really good job of calling out a lot of our blitzes. They were really prepared for it. And he made a lot of really big-time throws towards the end of that game that obviously pushed them over the edge. But I still feel like this defense is really good. And I think time will tell that. I still have faith in this defense. I know that we're, 30th right now in points allowed, which is not obviously bottom of the league. We're only ahead of the Jets and Bears right now. But I think a lot of that is not really, within context, with how this offense really was a non-factor in this game for most of this game until the third and fourth quarter. The defense is just taking way too many snaps, and especially way too many snaps against a good offense. In today's day and age, and especially with some of those penalties, it just was not a good mix. But I still have faith in this defense. I think, the guy that had the worst game on defense of the day was definitely Justin Coleman. He gave up a few big plays there. The really dumb thing that really ticked me off is the game plan was so good that sometimes that when we had double teams called, they just weren't executed. That's what really ticked me off. I mean, Jerome Baker had a blown double team at one point on a drag to Darren Waller. There was a corner out to Darren Waller that Byron Jones blew a double team where he wasn't aggressive enough on it. So I thought the defensive game plan was really good. We shadowed Darren Waller with Byron Jones most of the game, which I really liked. We moved X on Ruggs. Sometimes he was on Renfro. I really liked that too. And the Raiders just made a lot of really nice plays, especially towards the end of that game and especially in overtime. That post route to Derek Carr had to Edwards was perfect. And there's nothing you can really do about that. And the last thing I want to say is the obvious one, is the refs were just out of control in this game. I really thought that, especially that last one to Will Fuller, I thought that was pass interference. I don't know if they didn't want to throw it because of the pass interference they called that got us first and goal. I really don't know what especially the one to Devontae Parker was really bad too. But I thought the Will Fuller one was the most egregious one. I mean, the dude was literally in a mid-dive on his back. I really don't, and he got there early, clearly. I don't know. Especially over the weekend, we saw a lot of weaker pass interference calls called. I felt like that fit the criteria of a pass interference, and it's unfortunate that it wasn't called. And there were some other really bad unnecessary roughness calls in this game and personal foul calls in this game that I thought were ridiculous. So I thought the refereeing was just atrocious in this game. For both sides, I think, honestly, I think it was one-sided for sure. But we got some calls too. But I thought for the most part it was definitely in the Raiders' favor, and it is what it is. And I know we want to focus on the negative, and trust me, this before we get into the fan Q&A, I want to say this is to wrap my thoughts on this game. This really did take the wind out of my sails big time, especially with that 3rd and 3 call. But when you look at the game, I still have faith in Josh Boyer and Brian Flores as defensive callers. I think they're brilliant at what they do. I really do. And I would tell you if I didn't. I really do believe that. And I don't think much has changed in that department. They just have to the offense is such a zero right now. They just have to figure it out. And I think they did find something into this game. And I like the way Jacoby is playing right now. And it's like I said, and I know people probably don't want to hear this. I don't really care. But if he continues to play like this, I don't understand. If you benched him for 2, I just wouldn't really understand it. And I know you want to see his development. I know the fan base wants to see his development. But if he can continue to play like that, I think they can find something there offensively. So we'll see what they do with Jacoby and how much they trust him. I think after this game, they have to trust him even more. And especially if you look at his career, because I know they want to take care of the football, he doesn't turn the ball over. I mean, he really doesn't. I mean, this game proves it. He was under duress the entire game. He was patient with the ball. And he passed over 40 times, and he didn't turn the ball over once. So I trust Jacoby with the ball, and I trust him to touch the ball that many times. So it's just going to be interesting to see what the coaching staff does with him, and we'll see if they trust him even more. Apparently, I mean, according to some of the beat writers, he had a good camp. So I'm interested to see what he does with this opportunity. So let's get into the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. Sorry, I'm just trying to get... I don't know why this isn't pulling up. Sorry, guys. A lot of silence here. Okay, here we go. So this first question comes from Jack Pack. He says, I love the show. Thank you. He says, you need to bring back Harsh Truth segment from a few years ago. Overall, the team is headed in the right direction, but there are some glaring issues that need to be addressed. Yes, I agree that the team. Here's how I would put it. There's things to like. There's still things that I'm scratching my head at right now. The play calling was awful. That side of the ball has to be figured out. And if Godsey is the guy who's calling plays, which is obviously the rumor around the league, then give it to Eric Studesville, however you say his last name. Give it to him. I mean, clearly all the things that we heard about the Sean McVay, influence and all that other stuff, that's not true, clearly. Like I said, there's not a lot of innovation in this offense right now. There's not a lot of motion. I at least expected us to utilize some of the speed we had better, and clearly that's not happening. So they need to figure that out. It's not just the personnel, it's also just the play calling is not very good. And in that game, just no feel for the game at all from those play callers. Especially, I mean, that's a dead giveaway in that overtime call. You think, any other coach that is worth their salt as an offensive mind would never do that in overtime on 3rd and 3, ever. I think the biggest glaring issues right now facing the Dolphins is offensive line and play calling. Because I think their quarterback room is actually pretty good. They have to figure those things out. This next question comes from JackPack18. He says, good to see them show some life this week. 2 big problems, though. The inability of the defense to generate pass rush against the injury-riddled Raiders line, and that hot garbage play calling by the offense coordinators. Run the ball. It will open up the pass game and protect fragile Tua when he returns. I disagree. I mean, I disagree with that approach. I think they need to pass the ball to set up the run. And I know that sounds crazy, but I really do believe. I mean, that's what, especially in this game, what we're able to do to that pass rush is really slow it down with Jacoby. I think is the best offense that we've seen so far this year. So I think that's something that we can kind of learn from, and maybe a little bit more pace and a little bit more aggressiveness goes a long way for this offense, and I think it will help the offensive line too. In terms of the pass rush, I think you do make a good point. I think that was something that in this game, especially as the game went on, kind of got weaker. But at the beginning of the game, when this defense was fresh, it definitely wasn't a problem. They're just getting way too many snaps, and they really are. And against a good offense like that, you want to keep that down. You want to keep the snap count down, obviously. So if the offense could just give them anything, the defense will drastically improve. This next question comes from Nothing Face. He says, so far this season feels like most of Miami seasons. It seems like the defense keeps the game close, but they eventually fall apart after being on the field the whole game. Why can't we get an offensive scheme where we get first downs and give our defense a break? We always seem to try to have a fast pass offense, but still can't get first downs. Are we ever going to protect our quarterback and prioritize a quality offensive coordinator? I feel like the lack of a quality coordinator in the offensive line was a major reason why Tannehill only had one successful season here, and I love what we've done with our defense, but when will we realize that a good defense and no offense doesn't work? I completely agree with what you said, Nothing Face, about the offense and the defense, and I really do. Just from what I'm seeing, and especially rewatching stuff, like, it's not the defense's fault, and they have to they just have to get it together on the offensive side of the ball. And I do think we're going in the right direction with some of the things. So yeah. But I completely agree with you with the like you said, the offense is just on the field. The crazy part is, and this is a crazy stat, but I believe late in the second quarter, early third quarter against the Buffalo Bills, we actually had more possession time than them, and we still couldn't score. That goes to show you the disparity of the famine that is our offense. Like, contrast that with our defense. It's like a chasm. They just have to get something going on the offensive side of the ball. This next question comes from TR3MC. He says, hey, Skaggs, good show, bro. But does the first 3 quarters of this last game against the Raiders look like our play calling didn't match our players? Seems we switched play calling in the fourth quarter to make the game close. And is the 2 offensive coordinators a problem? I don't really. I would like to blame it on that, but I really do believe George Godsey is just making the play calling. In my opinion, I think that's what's happening here. I think Eric maybe installed the run game, but I think George is definitely calling the plays. And to answer the second part of your question, we saw this a little bit last year is when we had Tua in and we were a little bit more conservative. When Fitz was in, it was a little bit faster paced. It was a little bit quicker. And especially in preseason, when we did that against Atlanta, when it was quicker pace, when it was faster with Tua in the quick passing game, spread the ball out. That's when our offense was at its best. And I think hopefully the offensive staff sees that and Brian sees that, and we kind of go towards more of that direction. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "Hey Skaggs, I didn't even watch to follow this game because of the O-line until I heard we were up 14-0. Then everything went bad on that screenplay that ended in the safety. I thought this game was awful, worst game than the last two games. I believe the loss was more caused by the offensive coordinators or whoever the play calling duties go to. Thought our O-line was the problem with this team, but do you think the offensive coordinators are causing the problems for the Dolphins too? What did you think of that horrible screen pass in the end zone?" I thought it was really stupid, and I thought that 3rd and 3 call was even dumber. And I really do believe that. I don't understand how you can watch the game that I watched and call that play. I really don't. And it's almost like it's almost like the fans know the team more than our offensive coordinators at times, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. This question comes from Ethan. He says, "Are you ready to give up the farm for Deshaun Watson? I think 3 firsts and 2 seconds in Tua, and I would do it. Then pray everything works out by next season legally and spend the cap money on offensive line thoughts." I think people just got to give up the Deshaun Watson dream. And I know people don't want to hear that, but if you, who said this earlier in the fan Q&A? Whoever said the hard truth thing, you'll think it was Jack Pack. This is a hard truth for Dolphins fans. Just give up on the Deshaun Watson stuff. Until it actually happens, I don't want to hear about it anymore. Because it is just getting actually ridiculous. It's like a fairy tale at this point. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "Hey Skaggs, what did you think?" And this will be the last question. He says, "Hey Skaggs, what did you think of Jacoby Brissett's performance? Did you think the wide receivers performed good to the expectations, or did they also need work too?" I think, last game, some of the stuff that I was watching wasn't great effort-wise from our receivers. I thought this week was much better. I thought Jacoby kind of got him going a little bit, kind of juiced up the offense. But I thought his performance was really good. I thought it was probably the best, not even probably, I thought it was the best performance a Dolphin had on that particular game. I didn't even mention the missed field goal. Excuse me, I'm burping. At halftime. I think one of the other things one more point I want to give, and I forgot to make this point earlier in the show, but one of the other problems this Dolphins offense is having, and this is one of the reasons why they had so many tight ends dressed for this game, and a lot of defensive coordinators are noticing this. We keep a lot of players in the block. This is why you see a lot of teams, bailing out in the blitz, because we are so concerned with some of that stuff that we keep in more players to block, obviously, and sometimes we have 3 guys out there running routes, and they have the numbers advantage a lot of the time. And a lot of defensive coordinators are showing blitz and bailing out, and since the Dolphins are so concerned with some of the offensive line issues, they keep in more people to block, and then the defense has the numbers advantage. So that's something I've noticed. It definitely didn't happen as the game went on. We got more aggressive. We were like, hey, we have nothing to lose. It was a lot of we have nothing to lose mentality, and it worked. And I think the Dolphins need to err on more of the aggressive side, because this whole keeping in people to block and not utilizing some of these playmakers is just not working. Anyway, and this quick pass game trash is really it's a headache to watch. Anyway, without the stagnant and the staleness, all of it is just really annoying. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the show. I'm worried, and I know I said this these last few weeks, but I'm getting closer to doing some new content on this channel, which I'm excited about. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I would just keep spirits up. I still think this team is good. I still think it has a lot of potential. And I know people don't really want to hear that right now, but I really do still think this defense can still be special. in a lot of different ways. The offense, I think, hopefully found something. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.